Good afternoon, everyone. I am James Hare. I am the founder of Scatter, a wiki analytics and consulting company, and I am also the president of the WikiTide Foundation, the only 501c3 dedicated to third-party MediaWiki. I build wiki empires, and today I am talking about using Wikibase to track MediaWiki instances, which is to say, each individual website that runs MediaWiki. So let's look at the scope of the problem here. Like, we want to keep track of all of the different wikis that are in existence. Okay, how many wikis exist? So MediaWiki, as we were discussing earlier, was created for Wikipedia, for an online encyclopedia, text-based documents in English, and then eventually other languages as well. And so now, after MediaWiki was created just for Wikipedia, now the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the operator of Wikipedia, they themselves operate over 1,000 wikis. That includes Wikipedia in over 300 languages, but also other websites like Wikidata, as Yaron was just discussing, and Wiktionary and Wikisource, and all those. Those are all related websites that Wikipedia runs. And so those are just 1,000 of the wikis. And yet it gets so much bigger once you go outside of the walls of Wikipedia. You have Mirahis, which is what I'm involved in, the largest nonprofit wiki host, now hosts over 23,000 wikis. And I thought that was a really big number, but apparently Fandom, which is the largest commercial provider, hosts over 200,000, which is just a baffling number for me. I don't know what 200,000 wikis even looks like. This looks a little off-center.
It's the problem with the PDF presentation, apparently. Just doing it on the last one.
It's so strange, it was working just fine. Hopefully this will be fine.
So we have all these wikis, hundreds of thousands of them apparently, and we want to document them. So I have this wild idea. We can create a wiki to keep track of all the wikis. And someone already did that over 10 years ago. It's called Wikidata. It was built in 2012 using the semantic MediaWiki technology, I believe. It's had technical issues throughout its run, was actually taken down and brought back up at one point to rebuild how it works. At the scale of data that Wikidata is capturing, apparently they track over 46,000 wikis, and at the scale of data that it's been tracking, semantic MediaWiki or whatever combination of services it uses just hasn't been holding up that well, or the machine it's hosted on just isn't fast enough. All this to say is that Wikidata is a project I very much appreciate, but it's very much struggling these days. So instead of thinking, how do we reinvent Wikidata, we could also just think about it in terms of, okay, well, what's another way we could approach this underlying problem of creating wikis about wikis? So first, I'd like to give a quick introduction to Wikibase, if you're not already familiar. There are basically many different solutions for adding structured, machine-readable, machine-reasonable data on top of MediaWiki, which is a PHP site engine from 2003 created for an online encyclopedia of very heavy text documents with some images. And so what if you have data that isn't just documents? What if you have more structured information? Well, there are like 5 different things you can use for that. One of them is Wikibase, which was developed as a partnership of the Wikimedia Foundation and Wikimedia Germany. Google kicked in some funding early in the day. And it seeks to solve the problems of capturing semantic structured data and creating pages about entities with statements describing those entities. So everything in Wikidata or Wikibase, Wikidata is the largest Wikibase, but everything is an item. So if you have a person, that's an item. If you have a place, that's an item. If you have an abstract concept you want to track somehow, that's an item. And all items have statements, and a statement is a property and a value. So MediaWiki Users and Developers Conference, that's an item, that's an entity. Is held in, or city it is held in, that's a property. Salt Lake City, that's the value. everything in Wikibase can be reduced down to a combination of three things: an entity, a property, and a value. And that's Wikibase. And two of these Wikibase sites that I'll be talking about today are Wikibase World and Mirahi's Communities, which are both Wikibase sites that seek to solve the problem of making wikis about MediaWikis, but in their respective domains. So Wikibase World, which came first, I founded it in 2023, and the problem I was trying to solve is that Wikibase provides a sort of common ontology, as it is called, a common way of very abstractly describing what kind of things exist and how they relate to other things. And all Wikibases, in theory, are interoperable because they all rely on this common system. And so I thought, well, how about we put at the top a Wikibase that coordinates all of the Wikibases together? And so if you wanted to supplement Wikidata with data from more specialized sources, you could go to Wikibase World as a sort of central clearinghouse of these Wikibases and figure out how these wikis map together. And so it describes over 2,000 wikis, has a bunch of different statements for them, and it expresses it in the same language as Wikibase itself, turning information about the Wikibase ecosystem into data in its own system, basically. And so the idea is to promote Wikibase as an interconnected data ecology with Wikibase World as the central clearinghouse. And then there's Mirahi's Communities, which is a little more specialized. It's less about Wikibase for its own sake, and it's just more the tool I happen to use because, well, I already had a Wikibase, so why not do it again? But rather than try to keep track of the Wikibase ecosystem, this is more to keep track of Mirahi's own wikis that they host. They host over 20,000 wikis. These are largely community-built wikis, so not necessarily corporate or top-down management, but grassroots communities trying to document their favorite video game, or they're using a wiki as a role-play server. Lots of interesting things that people can use wikis for. And so I figured, well, we want to help people find these wikis. We want wikis to have new users. Why don't we create a place for people to actually promote their wiki in a responsible way? So I co-founded it with another contributor named Petramagna, and he has a bot that updates the Wikibase items with structured data. And adding structured data to Wikibase items with a Python script is super easy. It's been done many times before. And then those Wikibase items are used to populate values on those page. Let's see, is this a laser pointer? It is not. But if you can make out any of that, you could see here, info box along the side here, right? None of this is actually in the wiki page itself. It's on the corresponding item. And if you look up here, see, it's just a template call. You don't actually have to put the data in because it's on the Wikibase item. And so this is just a good way of getting structured data out of the rich text pages and into a more reasonable storage query location. And so rather than try to build, the large interconnected ecosystem of data, this is really more simply just a platform for community-built metrics, right? Because, as a board member of a nonprofit, I want data telling me about what my projects are doing. I need stories, I need narratives talking about, in a more qualitative way, what kind of work our community is doing. And so I figured, let's use a wiki to make that work easier. And these projects arose as separate projects, but they've ended up becoming two of the most successful wikis I've ever started. I define success as I go away, people still edit the wiki. That's success to me. And Wikibase World and Mirahi's Communities both have their own editor bases, and I only have to show up sometimes. And so what I've noticed between these two projects, what I think sort of make them work, one is that each of them is not trying to solve the entire problem of how do we track the entire MediaWiki world. They're just trying to solve their specific scoped problems, whether it's keeping track of Wikibases or keeping track of the Mirahi's hosted wikis. And each wiki is kept close to their respective communities. Like, I think every MediaWiki user there is sort of a large loosely defined group of people, but the Mirahese community's wiki is on Mirahese for Mirahese users, and so that just makes sense. And the Wikibase world is on Wikibase Cloud, which is a Wikibase hosting provider. So it's all close to where the community actually is. It reuses technology. It minimizes the use of custom code. It uses pre-existing deployments of MediaWiki, and it uses pre-existing MediaWiki extensions and pre-existing MediaWiki services. And that's what you want for a long-term sustainable project. You want to do as little work yourself as possible and rely on other people to do the work for you. And neither is perfect, of course, but these technologies have been proven to work at scale. Wikidata has over 100 million entities, and between the number of entities it has and all the properties used to describe those entities, Wikidata has a combined total of over 10 billion triples, which means 10 billion individual discrete facts in Wikidata. And it absolutely isn't easy to run a Wikibase at that scale, but it's possible. And another one, which is a little more subtle, is just the idea of self-promotion as an engagement loop, right? I think engagement loops are one of the hardest problems for wikis to solve, but this is a wiki about wikis. And so I figured, you know what? Maybe a little self-promotion isn't a bad thing if it gets people to update the wikis. And in the case of Mirahese communities, we want people to be editing those wikis, so it makes sense that you should be allowed to write a page about your wiki, as long as you agree to be neutral and factual in how you describe it. And same thing with Wikibase World. We want to know, Wikimedia Germany wants to know how many people are using the Wikibase software. That's how they justify their funding. And so if we tell people, say, hey, if you create a Wikibase, you can document it on Wikibase World, it helps us with gathering metrics. And so I think between these recurring themes I've noticed, I think those are kind of keys to a successful wiki that I've kind of come across by accident. And the thing that I think is really important is the relationship between automated data updates and human data updates. Because I think either alone would be insufficient. If you just had bot updating the wiki and did nothing else, you wouldn't really need MediaWiki for that. You could just use a regular database and front end. But if it were all humans, well, humans have other things to do. We wouldn't be able to guarantee that the wiki would always be fresh and up to date. So we've settled on this hybrid strategy where we have bots add automated data, the latest page counts, the latest numbers, and that's added to the Wikibase item. And then people can come in and add narrative to those numbers. And the narrative doesn't necessarily fall as out of date as quickly as the numbers do. So I think it achieves a really nice balance between having a wiki that's updated by robots and a wiki that's updated by humans. And with Wikibase, the bots edit the Wikibase. It's in the format that the bots know how to work with. The bots don't have to try to figure out wiki text. The bots go where the bots are happy, and the humans go where the humans are happy. And so, we have a couple of these successes under our belts. Could we try to tackle wiki apiary with this? And I think, I could be wrong, but probably. The amount of data, we're talking about 46,000 wikis. I'm sure there are lots of statements about those wikis, but within that, I don't think we're talking about more than like several million triples, which sounds like a lot, but is feasible for Wikibase. And we wouldn't be able to migrate it. It would probably take some adjustment work, right? Because there are crawlers for Wiki apiary. They'd have to learn how to talk with Wikibase, and then a whole bunch of things on Wiki apiary assumes another stack. So it would definitely take work. But I think what we would get out of this is something that might be more reliable long-term because it relies on data tech that other organizations are working on. And as far as hosting this goes, I cannot promise this on behalf of Mirahese. I do not make these decisions personally, but I think if we could find a way to fit it into a reasonable technical footprint that could be kept online without constant babysitting, then I think it could fit onto something like Mirahese or another similar service. And so how did I come across this topic other than just happening to start these wikis and happening to succeed at it? As I see the scale of the internet and how the internet works these days, it's a contest of giants. It's giants competing against other giants. And individual wikis are very small, but wikis as part of an open ecosystem collectively are massive. And so I started to view wikis not so much as individual works of creativity, so much as a massive, sprawling, decentralized federation of content. And I want us to actually think strategically about this ecosystem and actually think, how can the wiki ecosystem as a whole work more closely together? Because if the internet is consolidating, then we have to consolidate with it, or else we'll just be replaced. So that's my spiel about my wikis. Thank you very much. Those are the links if you want to visit. That's my email address if you'd like to get in touch with me. Thank you.
Yes. So, is one of the people who started the other nonprofit that is focused on MediaWiki, but it's a 503c6 instead of 503c3.
That's why I was precise.
Yes. I am really excited about you seem really happy to take over, and some of these ideas you have about using Wikibase, to take over Wiki Apiary. I would love that. Anyway, let's talk more. There's also another project that we're looking at of a guy, I think in the fall I think I'm right, in the fall is supposed to be talking about this as well. But you are targeted, you have already given a presentation here on Wiki Apiary specifically, so let's do it.
Sounds great, yes. Mark is just generally enthusiastic about the project and would like to remind you that Wikitide isn't the only nonprofit, it's just the only 501c3. There is also the MediaWiki Stakeholders Group, which is 501c6, which is a social club?
It's more like a what do you call it, where you have,
It's sort of like a chamber of,
professionals working together.
a professional association.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
As I think a lot of people are interested in the Wiki Apiary related topic, and I'm curious if you've considered the possibility that this just shouldn't be a wiki at all. Like, I'm curious what value you think there is in having it be freely editable, as opposed to, like, when I want sort of something Wiki Apiary-ish, what I essentially want is a spreadsheet or something that is a relational database with all of that data. And I feel like the hard part there is not really structuring the data or scaling it, because I think the issues with Wiki Apiary aren't really related to it having, 50,000 semantic MediaWiki properties or something. Like, I think the interesting part of this problem is figuring out how to find all of the wikis, because I think the list is much larger than has been documented anywhere.
Yes. So his question is about, or comment I suppose, is about how the interesting problem with Wiki Apiary isn't so much the wiki software, but the sort of problem of wiki discoverability, discovering wikis, and then keeping track of them in a database. And I guess I would add that, yes, wiki, if the goal was purely data collection and organization and reasoning, then we wouldn't need to use MediaWiki at all. Where I see MediaWiki coming in is two elements. One, you still need narrative, right? Like, wikis are communities, there's narrative behind that, and pure databases aren't going to solve that. The other is human curation of data, right? Like, if you have all your data stored in a opaque database that no one can access, then errors are a lot harder to correct. If you put the data in a place that is publicly and transparently accessible, then you can see why the report said what it said. And you could fix it if it's wrong. So yeah, I generally think in terms of like using the right tool for the right job, and where I see MediaWiki fitting in is not so much it can be a really good database, so much as it can include a database that people can then add human written narrative on top of.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about it more.
Sure. Any other questions?
There's a comment, I don't know if I guess it's a comment from you very good idea, in my honest opinion.
Thank you. Anything else? I think we have lunch soon.
Oh,
Yes. Yes.
you know, one obvious downside of Wikibase, the Wikibase software, as I pointed out for Wikidata, is the lack of inline queries, lack of visualizations, and so forth. What would you imagine being done with this kind of setup?
So Wikibase used in conjunction with a Sparkle query service can provide visualizations. That would be a matter of setting up a Sparkle server, which I have not done yet. I will be doing that at some point. Inline queries, as in like being able to like query part of Wikibase and then use it to like automatically fill in a template.
No, just something like, here's the list of all wikis that are running this version of MediaWiki.
Right, you would have to use something like a bot for that. Yeah, for Mirahis communities specifically, I'm not sure that Wikibase is the only tool that can be used for it. It's just what we had on hand and the one I was familiar with. With Wikibase World, it's much more about like describing the Wikibase ecosystem in Wikibase's own language. So that's what makes it more specialized there. But I would generally agree that as far as like capturing and expressing structured data and generally, Wikibase isn't the only solution. Any other questions? Thank you very much for listening today.